Have you ever been in a relationship that made you feel like you were losing yourself? One moment you're adored, the next you're ignored or even punished. You feel like you're walking on eggshells, and somehow everything is your fault. This is what narcissistic abuse can feel like, plus so much more. And if you have attachment wounds, the pain runs even deeper. Hi, I'm Laura Bonk, therapist and founder of Pathways Counseling KC. In this episode of Healing Attachment Trauma, we're exploring how narcissistic abuse triggers unresolved attachment wounds and why that dynamic can feel so magnetic and so devastating at the same time. So let's break it down. What is narcissistic abuse? Narcissistic abuse is a pattern of emotional manipulation and control. It's usually from someone with high levels of entitlement, low empathy, and a need for dominance or admiration. And this can look a lot of different ways. And someone who is narcissistic, it doesn't mean that they have full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. They could just be narcissistic. Either way, this pattern exists regardless of if an actual diagnosis has been made or not. I want to make that really clear that just because someone hasn't been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, that doesn't mean that they don't have narcissistic tendencies that are impacting you. It's not just about someone being selfish. It's about these cycles of idealization, which is the love bombing stage, then devaluation, which is that cycle of emotional abuse, of psychological abuse, of all of a sudden you're not being adored anymore, you're being abused, and it's very confusing. This is when patterns of silent treatment come in, gaslighting, manipulation, blame shifting, all of these things that are hallmark of a narcissistic relationship, which I will get into in a later video. This is just going to be a high-level video going over, again, the what is narcissistic abuse and how it impacts attachment wounding. So the devaluation stage, and then after that, it is the emotional withdrawal or discard stage, where the narcissistic individual will usually leave the person completely or completely pull back emotionally, and then the cycle starts all over. So this again gets complicated and it's very nuanced in different situations, but this really does leave the other person feeling confused, self-doubting, and emotionally drained. Like, what is going on? And it can cause so much internal turmoil that a person can feel like they're dying inside emotionally because of all of this abuse. The next stage, and this is, again, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but it's the hoovering stage, where the narcissistic individual will pull someone back in, and the love bombing, or like the idealization stage, starts all over. So that is, in a nutshell, narcissistic abuse. Another hallmark characteristic of the cycle in narcissistic abuse is the trauma bond. So this kind of relationship often creates something called a trauma bond, which really is a powerful, addictive attachment to someone who is also harming you emotionally. In this situation, you're constantly seeking closeness, safety, validation from the very person who keeps taking it away, or will give it to you in little doses and then take it away. And what this does, and there's reasons for this psychologically, but it literally creates an addiction to the person who is doing this to you. And if you grew up with inconsistent love or emotional neglect, this pattern may feel very familiar and even normal. which again is why we're attracted to this to start with, is because it fits our subconscious comfort zone. Um, in my own practice and experience with seeing clients who have been through narcissistic abuse, I have yet to see anyone who has been securely attached end up in a narcissistic relationship for the long term. They usually leave after seeing the pattern and finding that this isn't healthy and good for them, so they leave. So, thus, attachment wounding makes us more susceptible to entering into a relationship with a narcissistic individual. This is why it triggers attachment trauma. Number one, there's 5 reasons that I'm going to go over today. Again, there's so much more, but there's only so much I can put in one video. But number one, it mimics early attachment dynamics. So if your caregivers were emotionally unavailable, critical, or unpredictable, your nervous system learned to equate love with instability. And so when a narcissistic person love bombs you one moment and then withdraws the next, your body doesn't see the red flag there because it's so used to it. It's like, oh, this is normal. It sees a familiar pattern and it's trying to survive again. And even though it doesn't feel good, it's familiar, and familiarity equals safety. So it's just a survival pattern. Number 2, it activates your deepest fears of abandonment and unworthiness. Narcissistic abusers often use tactics like gaslighting, silent treatment, or emotional withholding, and this hits right at the core of attachment trauma. The belief that you're not enough or that love has to be earned through self-sacrifice and pushing your own needs down. These are things that in previous videos that we've talked about, and you can kind of see the connection here, that if you've learned to push yourself down, if you've learned that your needs don't matter and that you're not enough, you're going to be attracted to relationships or to people who treat you that same way because of that subconscious comfort zone. So you find yourself working harder and harder to fix the relationship because on some level, you believe that you're the problem. And as I talked about in that previous video, the term repetition compulsion leads us to jumping into the same cycles of relationships, the same patterns, in order to fix something that was previously broken or out of control before. And so we can see how that's repeating itself right here. Number 3, it keeps you stuck in the anxious avoidant loop, or like the anxious avoidant trap, which we haven't gotten to yet on this video, and I will. I keep saying that. There's just so much content to cover. But many survivors of narcissistic abuse swing between craving closeness and shutting down emotionally. And that, again, is because of the attachment trauma, the trauma that a narcissistic individual causes someone to go through. And then this cycle mirrors the push-pull of childhood. You wanted love, but it wasn't safe. So you learn to cling, perform, or numb out just to stay connected, which again, the narcissistic individual mimics that completely. It mirrors that. Number 4, it reinforces shame and self-doubt. Over time, narcissistic abuse erodes your sense of self. You start to question your memories, your needs, and even your reality in really extreme cases. You may think or say things like, maybe I'm overreacting. They're not always like this, so it's okay. Or maybe if I just did something better, whatever it is, if I did ABC better, they'd treat me differently. These are trauma responses, not character flaws. They're signs that your attachment wounds are being reopened in real time, and not just reopened, but at this point reinforced. Our wounding from our attachment trauma, what happens is our subconscious mind is imprinted through those experiences. And in order to create these beliefs about ourselves, we've had to go through what's repetition and emotion. That is how our subconscious is wired, conditioned, programmed. All of these words mean the same thing. We have to go through repetition and emotion to get these conditions, or to get this conditioning met, to get this conditioning. And then in order to heal from that, we have to also leverage that same thing, repetition and emotion, to heal these wounds. However, if we're just getting into relationships and going through the same pattern over and over again, it's just reinforcing these beliefs and patterns that are already there. And a narcissistic individual will do that to the extreme. So again, these signs or these wounds aren't just being reopened, they're being reinforced, and it just eats away at your self-esteem, your self-worth, your sense of self, until you've completely lost yourself and feel like a shell of a person. So why is it so hard to leave? One of the most heartbreaking parts of narcissistic abuse is that it often feels harder to leave than to stay, especially when your nervous system is wired to equate inconsistency with love. You might intellectually and logically know it's unhealthy, but emotionally you're terrified to walk away. And there's a variety of reasons why this is so hard and so scary that, again, I'll get into in a different video, but this is very real. And just know this is not weakness, it's survival. Again, your body is trying to protect you from the grief, abandonment, and emotional withdrawal that you may have experienced as a child. And so if those experiences from childhood are not healed, and then we get into a relationship with a narcissistic individual, we don't want to experience that again. That was so painful to go through the first time or multiple times in childhood. Our subconscious and that survival mechanism, that survival response, is going to do everything it can to prevent us from feeling those things again. And so we're going to cling and stay in a relationship that is actively hurting us just to avoid feeling abandonment, that sense of isolation and aloneness, that grief, the feeling of I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. Like how can I be alone right now? I can't bear it. All of that stuff. We would rather stay, or our subconscious is saying, no, stay in this painful relationship because it's less painful than it would be to go through all of that again. Healing is possible. Here's what I want you to know. If you've been in a narcissistic relationship and feel like you've lost yourself, you can find your way back. In fact, you can find a more concrete, more fulfilling version of yourself. You can not only find your way back, but you can grow farther than you have before. You can develop a fuller sense of self. It's possible. It's actually something called post-traumatic growth. And again, we'll get into that later. But it is possible, and you can really, really, truly create the life that you want, even after losing yourself in a narcissistic relationship. If you've internalized the belief that love means pain, you can relearn what safe love feels like. And if you're stuck in a trauma bond, you are not alone. And I promise you are not crazy. Trauma bonds are extremely difficult and painful to break. And it's a process. And it takes very, very intentional work, surrounded by support. You can't do it alone. It's nearly impossible to do alone. And again, you need to have compassion for yourself. It is not your fault that you're in a relationship that is hurting you. It's your survival response that got you here. And you can leave and you can heal. So in upcoming episodes, We'll explore how to begin healing attachment wounds through reparenting, inner child work, and rebuilding safety inside your own nervous system. Again, if this episode spoke to you, please subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with someone who might be quietly hurting as well. Remember, you deserve relationships that are emotionally safe. You deserve to be believed, and you deserve peace. I'll see you in the next episode.